These are two shell fragments from the fighting near Oti in 1944. On June 7th, the North Nova Scotia Highlanders and the Sherbrooke Fusiliers attacked along these fields over here, capturing the village of Buron and the village of Oti. What the Canadians didn't know was that they were being observed by a German divisional commander at the RB Ardennes just over here. In the afternoon, shelling started to increase, and the Germans launched a massive counterattack on the flanks of the North Novas. It was the North Nova's first fight, and it was the first encounter the Canadians had with the 12th SS.
As the Canadians advance beyond Oti, looking down on them from the Abbaye d'Ardennes is veteran SS commander Kurt Meyer.
A Canadian tank is pushing through the orchards. The commander opens the hatch and examines the terrain. Is he blind? Has he not realized our guns are aimed at him? Obviously not. Now it is clear. His tank has moved out to protect the flank. My God, what an opportunity. Canadian tanks are moving right across our front. The Canadian commander seems to see only the airfield. It is directly in front of him. He does not know that destruction awaits him.
Advancing across the fields is Canadian tank commander Sidney Radley Walters.
The reconnaissance group was half a mile out front. We heard the reconnaissance signal. I can see movement in Carpiquet, and we thought we'd take it that day. Then it all happened.
The enemy tank at the head of the spearhead smokes, and I watch the crew bailing out. More tanks are torn to pieces with loud explosions. Canadian infantry try to reach Oti and continue the battle from there, but in vain. The 3rd Battalion's Grenadiers are very determined. They want to enter Oti.
Enemy metal monsters, panzers, lurching through orchards, shouldered through hedgerows, or lurched across fields of grain. And then we saw enemy infantry on their feet, moving with tanks in extended line. Everyone was shouting. Villages and haystacks were burning. Tanks were burning. And for a while, it was a bit like a shooting gallery. And then the Germans closed in on the village of Oti and C Company of the North Novas.
This is the village square in Oti. It's named Place of 37 Canadians in honor of the men that were killed here. There are a number of memorials to the Canadians in Normandy, and this one is particularly moving. It says on June 7th, 1944, in this town and in the surrounding fields, the North Nova Scotia Highlanders experienced their baptism of fire. 84 North Novas and 7 citizens of Oti lost their lives this day. Amongst the 100 missing was George Westlake.
Dear Mary and Johnny, how long do you think this damn war is going to last? So me, Al, and Tommy can get the hell home again. It can't last much longer, can it? Have you got a letter off Tommy and Albert? Well, I guess I'll close now. Lots of love to everybody. George.
While the North Novas reel under the 12th SS attack at Oti, the Regina Rifles are fighting to hold the village of Brettfield. With the Reginas is Rifleman Bill Burton.
June 8, we had one of the fiercest enemy attacks of the entire war. 2 Panther tanks had penetrated right up to the front gates of our battalion headquarters. The 1st Panther fired machine guns and an 88 up the street at our headquarters.
This is the village of Bretteville, and one of the most exceptional actions of the Normandy campaign was the defense of Bretteville by the Regina Rifles. On the evening of June 8th, the Germans attacked the Reginas, and there was fighting in and around the village for 6 hours. The fighting was so intermingled that a German Panther actually came down this main road here. 3 Reginas with a Piat put it out of action and left it a burning wreck.
Riflemen Gil Carney, Clarence Hewitt, and Joe LaPointe, they fired off one bomb and hit the tank broadside. A rifleman ran out with the Piat and fired a bomb at the tank at point-blank range, and it started to burn up. A second tank down the street, after seeing the lead tank burning, they backed up and retreated the way they had come.
Liberating the village of Puteaux, just a few kilometers from Bretteville, is D Company of the Winnipeg Rifles, led by Lockie Fulton.
I was leading a battalion, and I arrived in the center of the village there of Puteaux. And the mayor of the village was there to welcome us. We had the usual thing. He presented the Calvados that he had kept, he said, the whole war for this particular occasion. And, but it was my first taste of Calvados, and I said, no, I've got to fight a war. I can't drink much of this. We consolidated a position right here. My company was right in this area. The next morning, about 9 o'clock, they attacked. We were in a good position, and with the help of our mortars and the artillery foo that was with us, we essentially drove them off. First I heard of the real catastrophe that we were in was a message from the battalion commander for me to withdraw, in which I couldn't understand what that was all about because I'd had a good position and driven them off. And I never realized that they'd got us, done the damage that they had.
All across the Normandy front, the Germans counterattack, taking many prisoners, including men from the Regina Rifles.
And it was when they were being marched south, they were moved into a field, and a staff officer moved them into the field and ordered the guards to start shooting them.
In the first 2 weeks after D-Day, the Germans capture hundreds of Canadians, and the SS murder more than 150 Canadian prisoners of war. One of them is Major Fred Hodge.
Fred was a long-time member of the 1st Battalion. He was taken prisoner, and then for whatever reason, were shot. And I believe that Fred was shot many times, and I believe his head was almost severed when he was found. So, very tragic. Fred was the same age as I was, 25 years old. I do feel terrible about, so you're here for one day, picked up and shot and murdered. And that's hard to take, still today. Yeah.
Under repeated, desperate German attacks, The Canadian line bends, but it does not break. The Allied bridgehead holds. But if the Allies are to liberate Europe, they must break out of the narrow bridgehead and confront the German army in the open fields and towns of Normandy. In the weeks after D-Day, the German army gathers almost 2,000 tanks and more than 250,000 men to attack the invasion bridgehead. The Allied plan is for the British and Canadians to grind the German panzers down in the fight for the city of Caen, while the Americans prepare to break out of the bridgehead and head towards Paris. To keep the pressure up on Caen, the Canadians are ordered to attack a line of villages close to the city, including Le Mesnil-Patry. Heading towards Le Mesnil-Patry with the Queen's Own Rifles of Canada is Company Sergeant Major Charlie Martin.
Riding a tank from village to village for transportation is one thing. That's the way we started the action. But the battle was different. Once the 88s opened up, we might as well have tried to ride a wild bull. The tanks sped up, turned abruptly, or worst of all, blew up. With weapons like the 88, the enemy had our tanks pretty well at their mercy. Firing from dug-in positions about 800 yards away, they had easy targets. Our tanks had to get out. The drivers couldn't see the ground directly ahead or under them, so a soldier on the ground had almost as much to fear from his own raging tanks. The battle raged for a very short while. Within 15 minutes, the enemy knocked out 19 tanks. In all, the Queen's Own lost 87, killed or wounded.
This is the Canadian battlefield of June 11th, 1944. In the afternoon on June 11th, Sherman tanks from the 1st Hussars, carrying men of the Queen's Own Rifles of Canada, of course they're mounted all on their tanks, came across these fields. They got about halfway when the Germans opened up on them and the tanks started to brew and the infantry started to get killed. And almost out of desperation, a group of the Queen's Own, including Tom and Al Westlake, headed for Le Mesnil-Patry over here. But the village was swarming with Germans and the Queen's Own never had a chance.